Rufus is actually going to start this afternoon session for 30 minutes and show you some deeper dives and newer features in the design applications. But I thought I would I would start this section with a little something to just kind of give you a little more energy and wake you up for the afternoon. Because, you know, we've been talking about the Creative Cloud, and for those of you who were here with us back in March, you actually saw a little work in progress, a little project of my own, a little Behance work in progress that I've been working on, because Rufus and I realized that it's not enough just to talk about the Creative Cloud, but as I often do, I needed to sing about it.
Yeah.
So, very briefly, it's still a work in progress. It's not quite finished yet, but just to start the afternoon with a smile, I present to you, welcome to the Creative Cloud.
You have longed for this dream since way back in CS2. The cloud. Welcome to the cloud.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Using the Refine Edge and Refine Soft Matte in After Effects, of course.
And some video footage from Fotolia.
And some video footage from Fotolia, as a matter of fact. Yes,
That's
so
right.
thank you, Fotolia. All right.
All right. So now we can move to my screen. And where I want to start over, let me just quit my mailbox a second and move back over here to Photoshop, because I saw some tweets about, you know, that shake reduction, and some people said, oh, if it really works like Rufus showed it, well, you know, it's going to be huge. But anyway, so what I did is I went into my own photo collection just now during lunch break, and I was actually looking for a picture that had that shake. And this is a picture I took in Moscow, and I was always very unhappy about the fact that I had that shake. So I did. Let's try it on my own picture, not on the usual Adobe demo material. So just to start off this session, I'm going to do the shake reduction on this picture here. Let me just zoom in a little bit, and you clearly see the shake here. So again, filter. I'm going to convert it for a smart filter. Okay, so I can turn it on and off, and then filter, sharpen, shake reduction, and then of course it takes the center of the image as a reference point. It's calculating it, and as soon as it's done, zack. Does it show? Yeah, I mean, did you see the difference? And the cool thing is that I'm going to zoom into here because it's a very small icon, but this is actually what Photoshop does. It takes the starting point and then the shake, and that's the direction in which the pixels get pushed. All right, so when I actually commit to that and say OK, and then look at the picture again, this is how it is now, and this is how it was before, okay? So pretty good result. I start seeing again all the bricks and everything, all the detail that I lost in that picture. All right, so let's talk about another thing. I was talking about algorithms this morning, and one of these algorithms is, of course, the upsampling algorithm for images. So the way I want to show this to you is to go under here, under image size, and actually change the resolution from 1600 to 2500, for example. And you can see that this is how the image would normally be, okay? You see the pixels and a little bit of blurring, but the new algorithm actually corrects that for me. And this I can do thanks to the resample algorithm that I have here, and I can choose to preserve detail, to have a little bit smoother, you know, to also use for the reduction and gradients and hard edges. I have many different choices to actually upsample images. So when I commit to that and say, OK, my image is now bigger, but I didn't lose any of the detail in the image, OK? So of course, this is something that should be always avoided, right, to take a small image and to make it bigger. But in this case, be aware that in Photoshop CC, you can now do that in a much better way. Another thing that was added to Photoshop CC is the fact that if I draw a vector object, like a rectangle, for example, and I'm going to make a button here, for example, in my web page, this new properties window opens, and I can choose from here the fill color of the object. Let's make it this color, okay? And directly from this window, I can now also change the roundness of the corners. For example, 20 pixels, and boom, this is now applied to my object here. And like Paul showed you this morning, you can now also copy the CSS code for that object and paste it right into your web page code or CSS code. So much more control over the properties of vector objects in Photoshop. Then I just wanted to go over two features that were added in Photoshop CC in December. Okay, this is when we had our big event in San Francisco, and these are two features that were added to Photoshop CC. And one of them is the ability to actually use smart objects. If I open this, of course, it'll open the original image, okay? And if I close this, I will go back to my composited image. But what is new is that I can now apply the filter, blur, and use field blur, iris blur, and tilt shift directly on the smart object. And the benefit of this, of course, is that I'm not destroying any pixels. So let's do a tilt shift here to transform Cape Town into a mini town. And I can, of course, go in here and change exactly where the gradient changes. And you see these little things here is what we call on-canvas editing. And this is something that we will see more and more in our applications, the ability to change properties right on the image. So if I use this little gizmo here and actually turn it around, you can see how easily I can change the blurriness of the image itself. Okay, so let's leave it like this and commit to that. Then, of course, this is a smart object, so I can always go back to the original. All right? And then what I would do, of course, is also maybe do a little adjustment layer with maybe some saturation to make this, this image look a little bit more like plastic. And I will change the saturation like that, exaggerating a little bit. And this is also non-destructive because it is a layer that I can turn on and off. Okay, so very, very quickly, I'm able to do to apply these new filters in Photoshop CC. How many of you spend their time in Photoshop cutting out images? That's very many of you. So this is the answer I get everywhere, because we spend a lot of time doing that. So what do? Do you use the, this tool here? Quick selection tool? No? Tragic wand tool? Yes? Or do you use maybe the lasso tool or the polygonal lasso tool? No? No, we are all pros, right? We use this tool. Yes? Do we agree? Yeah. All right, so check this out. All right, Photoshop CC December version. So now let me just zoom in a little bit more so you can all see that and move that image down a little bit. And then with the pen tool, I will go here and go click and drag and click and drag, something like that. And then I will go, You remember? Command-Z, go back, select again, do another point, right? In Photoshop CC, you press the space bar and you go, yeah, you like that? Makes it much, much easier. And you see, this is one of the benefits of Adobe Creative Cloud, the ability to also work on these small things and make them available as they become, as our developers are ready. And we can just ship it to the Creative Cloud version. And this is one of those examples. All right, let me see if I have any other things here. No, let's move on over to Illustrator, because there's a couple of things that I want, a couple of other things that I wanted to show you here. Actually, let me just jump over to Bridge and open these, and let's open that file. And basically, what I want to do, I want to create this with this. So let me just make sure that the whole interface is in here. And I will just take the right layer, like this one, and actually do it like that. Okay, So in the keynote, I was talking about our investigation in the touch features, touch-enabled devices, like the Wacom, the new Wacom screens that you can see outside, or the Microsoft Surface devices. And one of those things that we would like to do with our hands really is to modify objects, to stretch them, to skew them. And of course, we would use the transform tool for that. So let me select this object for a second and use the new transform tool. And you see that you get these buttons, which are very useful for the touch-enabled devices. But if you don't have a touch-enabled device, it works the same, because when I zoom in, you see that we have new little icons here. And now I can take that, for example, I can click in here, I can move that around, I can very quickly place that image exactly where it needs to be, okay, to give this impression that the hand tag was actually, let me move this around here. I can do it. I can even rotate it. I can do all of these transformations very, very quickly on the artboard itself. So let me do that slightly better, like this. I'm getting there. All right. And so, okay? So very, very easily, I can now transform these things in Adobe Illustrator. Now, let's move back to our map poster here, because there's other things that in Illustrator are quite complicated. And that is to create borders like this. All right? So you see that this border here is something that in the past would have required a pattern brush that was composed of several different symbols, right? So we have a symbol for this area and a symbol for this area, and we had to prepare everything ahead of time. This has changed now. Let me zoom out. Oh, wrong page. Let me go to the next page. Where is it? I got lost here. Oh, here we go. All right, so let me zoom in here and actually take these vector objects that I have and drag those into the brushes panel and let go. And I want to create a pattern brush. At that point, if I say OK, we already get the pattern brush automatically created. And you can see that the corners have been automatically created. And if I go here, I can choose between, of course, the old way, you know, like using patterns here and using them from here. Or I can say I want the corners to be auto-centered, something like that. Or I can say the inner corner is not auto-centered, but I would like auto in between. And automatically, Illustrator creates those corners for me. How many of you use these pattern brushes? Very few. Okay. But so you know the pain. You know how much time this actually saves you. So let's say OK to that. And my pattern brush is now here. And if I select this object and apply the pattern brush, whoa, that's big. Let's make that slightly smaller, 0.25 pixels. And automatically, this is now created. Of course, the benefit is that if I select one of the points and move it around, you see that automatically Illustrator will get the right angle, the right picture, the right everything inside of that pattern brush. All right, is that pretty cool? Yeah? All right, let's talk about another story here, and that is how many of you use Illustrator to create a website design? Very few, and I tell you why. Because your developers would hate you. Yes? So probably your developers prefer you to use Photoshop to do that. Is that correct? Yeah? So let me show you a new workflow that you can do with Illustrator. But to begin this story, let's move over here to Google Chrome. And basically what I have is a web page already set up with all the different divs, okay? And if I go and look at the code that is underlying this page, we see that I have all of the different classes, the dividers here, women's, men's, new arrivals, all of these things already inside of the HTML, all right? Now, if I go back to Illustrator, you will see that I have been very, very diligent at naming my objects in my layers. And if I select this one, for example, and open this layer here, and go down here, we see that this object here is actually called header background, head BG, okay? So as a designer, I talked with my developer and I said, okay, what is it you need from me, okay? So he said, I need you to name your objects. So for example, I named this object. And then in Illustrator CC, what I can do under Window here, I have a new CSS Properties panel. And when I open that with the object selected, you see that Illustrator gives me all of the information about the color of that object, header background, okay? It gives me the information that I need, all right? And then I could take that code and go over to my code editor and paste it in there. But it gets better. Let's select everything. And then inside of the panel, I will click this button here and say Generate CSS for everything I've selected. Boom. And we have this very long list now of CSS describing everything on that page. Okay? And it goes on and on and on. Let me see how long it goes on for. Whoa, oh, that's the end, okay? But it takes me the font family, the font weight, etc. It gives me everything about that specific CSS. Then I will press this little button down here and say Export Selected CSS. So let's do that. Let me just check that I'm in the right folder. Okay, and I'm going to create a new folder, which I'm going to call My, create, and then I'm going to call this one My CSS, and save it. And guess what this does? This exports all of the elements that I've selected with the appearance. There's options here with vendor prefixes for WebKit, for Firefox, for Explorer, Opera, etc. And then I will simply say OK to that. And if we go back into Bridge, you will see that inside of my folder here, Outdoor Homepage, I now have my folder, and inside I have all of the images that I've selected on the Illustrator file, plus the CSS for that page. Does that make sense? Easy. And then I will go back to my code editor. Let's actually go back to Chrome here and open my code editor. And what I will do, I will copy this snippet here and paste and say, OK, import URL of the CSS is my, and then my CSS. And I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to launch the preview. And boom. I'm in the browser with everything set up. All the text, all the colors, everything that I had on my Illustrator page. Yeah, this is pretty cool. This changes everything for designers, right? Because sometimes it's easier to actually do your work with vector graphics, and Illustrator is the application to do that. Now, you've noticed maybe that something is missing here. The big text here, all right, which I have in my Illustrator document. This one here, outdoor, okay? So let's just select it and copy it. I'm going to copy that object, Command-C, and then I'm going to go back to my Chrome here and my code preview. I'm going to go down a little bit and find the place where I need to paste that. And what do you think Illustrator copied this as, and I'm going to paste it as? Check this out. Paste. This is SVG. So I can now copy SVG directly from Illustrator into my code editor. And SVG is Scalable Vector Graphics, meaning that you can use that technology to have vector objects on your web pages. So let me save this. And maybe it's already there. No, let me just re-update the preview here. Let me just, I need to save it, of course. Sorry, I need to save the code. Save, and now it's not there. So let me just preview that again. Okay, it's reloading the page. And now this is SVG, okay? So I copied from Illustrator, pasted it into the code, and boom, it's right there in the page, in the right location, and everything. So this really is a completely new workflow that you designers can use to have a dialogue with your developers. Because basically, what you're giving them is all the information they need to take your design and put it into the code. All right. Oh, another little thing about Illustrator that I wanted to show. Let's go back here and actually view all in window. I'm going to go, let me just close a few panels here. I'm going to go here in the text panel. And one thing that we've been working on a lot in Illustrator is the text engine. Illustrator would become kind of slow when many text boxes are linked together. And maybe you make a correction in the first one and all the text flows in the other text boxes. Well, we've changed a lot of that and made it much, much faster. But one of the, just remind me how many Illustrator users here? Okay, good. Check this out. I'm gonna zoom into here. I'm gonna use my type tool here and start typing. Or something, make that bigger, and something like that. And then suddenly you realize maybe I need to add more text. So you need to change your point type to an area type. Remember these two things here? Type tool, area type tool. Yes, the difference? Type tool puts everything on one line. And if I start moving it, you see it distorts everything. So basically what we had to do in the past is copy that text out, make a new text frame, and paste it in. Now we have this little button here that if I double click on it, this is now a bigger text box. Yes? Again, these are the small features, but these features make your life so much easier. And by the way, this thing that I've shown you in Photoshop when you go and draw, okay, like this, if you press the space bar in Illustrator, it's the same thing. Okay, so you can be very precise as well while drawing in Illustrator with the pen tool. Just a few other things on Adobe InDesign. I've shown you this morning about the QR codes, about the ability to download the fonts from Typekit using your Creative Cloud account, how to access those very quickly in the Type menu. But another thing that is very important in this release of InDesign is that we've completely rewritten the code. We've made it 64-bit. Many of you think, why should InDesign be 64-bit? I mean, what is so intensive in InDesign to deserve 64-bit? Well, the export functions of InDesign, for example, are very CPU heavy. And basically, that means that if exporting a PDF of your document takes you 5 minutes, now, in this new version, it'll take you 2.5 minutes, almost 50% less time to perform heavy-duty operations. But the other thing that this also allowed us to do is to adapt the user interface of InDesign, of course, to Retina displays, and also to add the dark user interface. So it's the same as Illustrator, Photoshop, the video apps, and many other apps in our Creative Cloud. Now, let me just show you the preferences in InDesign about that interface. You see it's up here, and very, very quickly, let me just move this window out a little bit. I can, of course, change the interface back to light or make it very dark. I can choose there, or I can be even very, very precise and say, I want the interface to be 22, okay? So you can actually go in here and really choose what type of interface you want to work with. All right? And by looking at all of these little icons here, you realize how much work has gone into redesigning the application of InDesign, because basically that meant having 2 sets of icons, one for the dark version, one for the light version. And there's literally hundreds of these icons that had to be redesigned also for Retina displays. All right. In the last few minutes that I have at my disposal, what I wanted to talk to you about is of course, Adobe Muse. And going back to Adobe Muse, what I wanted to because I've seen this morning that very few of you actually use Adobe Muse or know about Adobe Muse. Basically, like I said, it's the InDesign for designers that want to make a web page without having to go into the depth of the code, without having to know about CSS, JavaScript, or HTML5, or these things. This is made for designers who just want to drag and drop, lay out a web page, and publish it. So let's just create one. And one interesting thing you will see also is that Muse allows me to create a desktop version, a tablet version, and even a phone version. So you can create various versions of your website. And basically, what the first window we see is the plan window. And that's where you plan your website. And very quickly, you can say, OK, add pages to that, something like that. And then I can say, OK, this is the home page. And this is maybe a page for a map. And this here is a page for a gallery. And this here is maybe a page for a contact form. So let's say contact. All right? And basically, I've just created these 4 pages. And then I also have master pages, exactly like in InDesign, that I can apply automatically to my web pages here. So by opening that, what I'm going to do is do something very simple here and actually take one of those widgets that I have down here. The widgets are already formed code snippets that I can simply drag and drop into my composition. So in this case, what I want to do is import a horizontal menu. And all I need to do is to drag that menu and drag it over here, and Muse will place it here, and I can go up here and really make the menu the exact size that I want, something like that. And you notice that it says here, home, map, gallery, contact, exactly like I've done in my planning module. Then I can go back here and say, OK. And I can select the individual buttons, and if I select these, I can say, you know, what type of menu it is, if I want to show the page, if I don't want to show the page. But more importantly, I can change the color of the states. So for example, if I select the rollover state and change the fill color to something like red, okay, I'm done. Okay, so I have now the gray, the red, the mouse down, the active. And when I go back into my website here, we see that, oh, it's still, yeah, we see that these are now all created with all of the buttons. One really cool thing about Muse is that I can use web fonts. So if I make this on my home page, or so, let's make that bigger. Let's make it maybe 75, even bigger. Let's make it 150, let's exaggerate. And put that here in the middle. I can, of course, choose from all of the fonts that are available as you know, the recently used fonts, web fonts, the web-safe fonts, and the system fonts. Okay, system fonts actually get translated over as images. So many come to me and say, "Oh, but Google doesn't like that when a text becomes an image." Well, beware that in the code there is actually the alt tag. Okay, that you don't need to see, but be aware that Google can actually look at that too. But the really cool thing is when it comes to web fonts. I can add a web font, and part of your Creative Cloud membership is access to this Typekit library. And very, very easily, I can go in here and say, I want this Alice font. You see, there's over 600 fonts in here that you can use. It takes some while. Okay. Let's take, I don't know, Yeseva 1, yesteryear. Let's take this one, okay? So let's say OK. And then it's adding the font into my menu. I'm going to say OK. And here, if I now go back to my web fonts, yesteryear is here. And very quickly, this font has been applied, all right? And the cool thing about web fonts is that when I publish the website, my text looks good, and you can select it, you can copy it, you can paste it into other things, and it is very, very easy to index for the search engines. Another thing that we may want to do is maybe add a map. So what Muse does, it leverages iframes. So let me just create a box here just to understand how many pixels this is wide. This is 920 pixels. OK, that's the width I want my map to be. So let's go over here to Safari, and actually go to maps.google.com, and I will look for, oh, that's a new version. I wonder how that will work. Warsaw, find. Okay. The new Google Maps. Did you see that, Jason? Yeah. I never saw it. So let's zoom in. Okay. And then let me see if I can find it where I can actually do that now. Where would I save? No. Come on. Where would I copy the code now? I'm lost. Where do I get the iframe from? Can I go back to the old map? I don't know. Anyway, this I have to learn. I don't know how to share this map. Oh, maybe here? Directions? No. Does it, what? Okay, so how do I do that? Help and feedback. You can't do it on this one version? Yeah. How, so you can't share maps from the new version? Crazy. Okay, so let me just get this and customize the view. And what I want to do here is actually have a custom map made, and I'm going to call it, I'm going to say 920 pixels wide, okay, and that's actually good. And then all I need to do is take this text down here, this code, select all, copy that, go back to Muse, and paste it here. I simply did copy, paste of the code, and Muse now understands that code, and I can now place this map exactly where I want it in my website, and I'm done. And when I preview that on my browser, I can go File, Preview Page in Browser. Muse will code all that with all of my buttons here. You see it gets red when I roll over it, with the map here, etc. So very, very easily, I can take snippets out of other websites as well. And let's do one last thing here. One last thing, yes. Maybe the contact form. And this is a feature that was introduced last year, the ability to actually put in widgets here, forms. Okay, so I can take a contact form. Let's take a simple contact form, for example, drag it into here, and place it here, you know, name, email, blah, 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 message. And then I can say how to name that, who to email that to. And then this used to work only on Business Catalyst. So many customers came to us and said, but this is something that I really would like also to be able to publish where I want. So with the new version of Muse that's coming out very shortly, you will be able to take the forms that you create in Adobe Muse and publish them where you like, okay? All you have to have on the web server is PHP, that the web server understands PHP, and your form will actually work. And just as a reminder from this morning, if I go back here to my web page, let me go here. No, not this one. And go to my Wild Isle website, is the addition now of this really cool feature where I can have elements actually scroll at a different speed than the speed scroll. And that is called the parallax effect. And again, if we go here into the zipline tours, we see exactly how that works. See? Like so. And of course, objects can fly in, fly out. Let me just place, I'm going to do this one last thing. I'm going to take, let's take this leaf here, okay, and open that and place it here on my page. Okay, and maybe I want it here. I want it to stop here. And I'm going to put the effect, scroll motion, and I will say that it just moves up to that specific area. When I scroll from this area, let's see how that will look. Preview page in browser. And oh, it moves in. I did the wrong thing. But as I scroll, you see that my leaf moves in and out of the page. Okay, so very, very easily I can create those effects now right here in Adobe Muse. And then, of course, I click the Publish button. It goes to Business Catalyst, where I have 5 websites included in my Creative Cloud account, and then I can manage it and give it to my clients to correct the text, etc., and have an overview of how many people have seen it and analytics and things like that. And with that, my friends, I will go, give it over to Jason, who has a little bit more video features to show you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Rufus. Okay, so I'm going to take you through some new features and video workflows and try and cover about 5 different applications here. And we'll start in Premiere Pro. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what we've done, as Rufus just showed you in Muse and in InDesign and in other applications, is to really just improve the process, improve the workflow. So this film that we've been showing here, that I've been showing, is it's called Waiting for Lightning, and it's a skateboarding film about this skateboard legend, Danny Way. And it used a lot of VHS and Super 8 archival footage that you can see displayed here. Another nice new feature of Premiere Pro is if you hit the D key as it's playing back, if you look in the timeline, it'll automatically highlight the clips that it's playing. And you'll notice here that this clip of a young Danny Way, this is probably from the early 80s, very VHS looking. It's very desaturated, a bit sort of noisy here. And as we move on to this clip here, also VHS, you can see this one is a bit more nicely saturated, looks a bit better. And we've got some effects applied to this clip. Specifically, we have some scaling in our motion effect here, but we also have the 3-way color corrector, and you can see that that's been applied. Now, I don't want to scale this clip here. I just want to apply the color correction that we used from this one. So one of the nice new features now is that you have what we call selective copy and paste attributes. So I can simply right-click and copy the attributes of this other clip, choose Paste Attributes, and now you can see I can choose if I wanted to scale it, I could enable motion. If there were opacity or time remapping, I could paste those. But in this case, I only want to apply the 3-way color corrector. Similarly, if there were audio effects or processes, I could paste those over as well. But now I can simply just apply the color correction, and you can see that now it looks nicely saturated, matching the other clip a little bit better. We can go ahead and play this back. Much nicer, saturated. Again, segueing into this one, saturated. And we only copied the effects that we needed. So selectable copy and paste, something you've been asking for, something some of the competition could do. Now we can do it in Premiere Pro CC. Now, another one of the things that we have been asked for the last year or so was a better way to use color, and more importantly, color presets. And some of you may be familiar, I'll show you this in a moment, with our application SpeedGrade. So SpeedGrade was introduced in CS6. It's a 32-bit floating point color grading tool, professional color grading tool, and it has something called the Lumetri Deep Color Engine. This is a 32-bit floating point color engine that truly delivers the best looking color and allows you to really grade your footage very artistically. Well, we didn't have any direct integration with SpeedGrade before, and people were saying, even if you can't do that, I would just like the ability to apply the looks, the look files, the color profiles or color presets from SpeedGrade in Premiere Pro. Well, now in Premiere Pro CC, you'll see that inside our effects panel, we actually have the deep color Lumetri looks built right in. And you can see that I've got an adjustment layer here on my timeline. And as I click on the various looks, you can see we have a whole series of different presets here: cinematic, desaturation, stylized looks, temperature looks. These are just the standard ones that ship with SpeedGrade. And this also gives you a little preview of all the different profiles of how these will look. Here's a look at the cinematic looks, the compression looks, day and night, a sepia-toned look. So a very common one is this kind of bleach bypass. You see this in films and commercials all the time. So with my adjustment layer applied, I can simply double-click on this. It applies the bleach bypass, as you can see here. And again, this is a 32-bit floating point color look. I can play this back. It plays in real time. And again, I'm using my fractional playback resolution. So if you see it looks a bit jagged here, right? It's not very sharp. When I stop, zzz, everything sharpens up because I have my playback resolution at 1/2. Again, I'm playing full HD on a laptop, no external hardware, with 32-bit floating point color in real time. But I have my paused resolution set to, let's go ahead and set that to full quality so that when I actually pause, oh, that was my playback. When I actually pause, you're seeing every pixel, everything as intended. And remember that one of the cool things that we did in Premiere Pro CS6 is something called uninterrupted playback. So while I'm playing this, I can turn the look on, and I can turn the look off, and playback never stops. This is 32-bit floating point color. Think about, even for those of you who don't do video, working in Photoshop or Lightroom and being able to play back HD content with 32-bit color. This is an incredible innovation. And this is because not only now do we have GPU acceleration in Premiere Pro CC, which we had with CUDA cards and other supported cards, but if you go into your project settings now, under General, we will now effectively allow you to use OpenCL even on non-supported cards. This is a huge thing because a lot of your laptops out there don't have the standard NVIDIA CUDA cards that we required. So now we'll effectively allow you to turn on GPU acceleration, and we'll prompt you and say, this may not be a supported card, but we're going to let you use the VRAM on your card to give you better playback performance. And as you can see on here, even with this unsupported card in this laptop, I get amazing performance. I can turn my looks on or off, and it just allows me to work very quickly and very effectively. Now, outside of using SpeedGrade looks, a lot of people have said, well, yes, SpeedGrade is wonderful, but actually, I would just like to use standard industry LUT files. Now, this is something that we added actually in After Effects CS6. Apply color LUT. Well, I'm now happy to tell you that in Premiere Pro CC, you can now use industry standard LUTs and look files directly on your content here as well. So if we go down into my effects panel, we have a separate effect called the Lumetri effect. And when you apply that, you'll see that it's asking you to select a look or a LUT file. And I happen to have a couple of raw standard LUTs here. I think I have a Technicolor. So let me go into my demo assets. Yes, we do. Generic LUTs. Let's go into our Technicolor 3-strip. Let's go ahead and scrub ahead here. And now you can see, oh, and I've even got my little letterbox, which I can turn on over here. So now we've just applied a standard Technicolor LUT. Again, I can turn it off, turn it on. And these LUTs can be created in a variety of different applications. So again, you can now create your LUTs even whether in SpeedGrade or in something like Color Finesse and After Effects, and you don't have to do your color correction there. You can now bring those LUTs directly into Premiere Pro and apply them to your HD content. So very cool, a lot of flexible color workflows in Premiere Pro CC. Okay, last thing I'm going to show you here in Premiere deals with, again, another highly requested feature, and that was the ability to have audio clip mixing right inside of Premiere Pro. Previously, if you wanted to make changes to audio levels, let's just take a quick listen to this.
Is that it was so much harder to create something completely new.
In order to achieve greatness,
Okay, so you can hear that those two levels are varied, and then as we get to the next clip here,
Doesn't matter how successful you have to keep checking.
the levels are all over the place. So if we wanted to modify these previously, we would have to go into the audio clip here and use our envelopes, use our rubber bands, and basically redraw all of the audio levels. Well, now in Premiere Pro CC, we have a separate audio clip mixer. And when you open up the audio clip mixer, this now allows you to adjust audio levels on the fly for individual clips. I can go ahead and turn down my...
in order to achieve greatness, you have to go through a lot of pain.
Doesn't matter how successful you have to keep challenging yourself. You have to keep doing it.
Okay, so you can see now that those changes have been applied, and if you look here, you can actually see that the rubber bands themselves have been adjusted. And if you take a look at audio track 2, my fader over here, as I move across these clips, it changes, right? So this clip I pulled down to minus 6.2. This clip I've pulled up to plus 6. This clip I've pulled up to plus 6. And it's just a much nicer visual way to adjust audio levels without having to go down and draw envelope points and click inside the audio clip. Even though we've made it easier now, and again, we've got nice metering down there as well, we just tried to simplify the entire process. So much more effective, much more fluent, and something that people have been asking for a while. Okay, so bouncing over to After Effects, we're going to talk a little bit about stabilization. Now, the last two versions of After Effects brought the warp stabilizer to life, and in Premiere Pro CS6, we added the warp stabilizer as well. And in this clip, what you can see here is that we have a handheld shot. There's a coconut on the beach, and if we simply applied the warp stabilizer to this previously, what it would do is it would average the movement, right? So it sort of just averaged the movement so that it didn't look so handheld, so shaky. But there wasn't really any way to simply lock down the shot. Now, we did have options for no motion, but it would average the image. So you'd end up with everything kind of locked down. It would look strange. And people kept saying, ultimately, I would like to take this and I'd like to isolate an object and lock it down, right, to create a lockdown shot. This is a really common process for shooting film and shooting movies and TV. Well, now we have something new called Warp Stabilizer VFX. And what I was able to do, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. Now, when I created my camera tracking points before, you may have noticed that I was able to select those points. Well, when you stabilize something, you can also select the points that it used for stabilization. And you can delete points so that it doesn't try and stabilize a certain area. The easiest way, though, and the way that I'd like to show you how to do this, this is what I find to be the most effective way, is to simply use a solid and an alpha track matte. So in this case, what I did was I created a dark gray solid around the coconut like that. And then I simply applied an alpha matte here. And I then applied the warp stabilizer so that it only focused on stabilizing just this area. So it's essentially going to lock down the movement of only the coconut, and again, using the no motion process. So, whereas before we had this, where everything was very shaky, and again, you can see the coconut kind of moving in and out of frame, I was able to turn it and lock it down into this very quickly, just using a solid and an alpha track matte and the new Warp Stabilizer VFX. Pretty cool, yeah? All right. Again, you see this a lot, and it looks very cinematic. It almost looks very strange, actually, how it's doing it. It's brilliant, and it just works so well. But we've done a couple of other things in the stabilizer, because a lot of people said, okay, that's great that you've done this ability to lock down shots. Here's an example where we have a shot that was already, it was on a tripod. So we filmed this on a tripod. However, the problem is that our subject here had some blemishes on his face, and we wanted to basically remove those before we delivered this film. Now, that's fine, that's easy enough to do, and what I would probably have done in the past, one of two things. Either I would go frame by frame and basically clone, because remember, for those of you not familiar with After Effects, we have the Photoshop clone stamp tool in here. It works the same way. So I could tape a sample from his skin and clone it and advance the frame and take a sample and clone it and advance and clone it. Very, very long process. Now, this shot is only 10 seconds. If the shot were a minute, that's a lot of time. Now, the other thing that you could do is you could actually use a tracker. You could track the motion of the blemishes, which is easy because pimples are round, so it's easy to lock onto them. Never mind. Anyway, but the problem with that method is that you would then basically cut out a piece of his forehead create a solid, a piece of his forehead of skin, and you would then paste it to the tracked area. And the problem is that as his head is moving, the light is changing, so that's not really going to work so well either. You'd wind up doing a lot of manual correction to make it look real. So what we needed was a way to actually reverse stabilize something. We need to lock down his head movement. The shot is locked down, but his head is moving. So we need to be able to lock his head down so that we can paint consistently, but then we need to put his head back. That sounds very complex, doesn't it? Yes, we can. So now, with Warp Stabilizer VFX, we have a feature called reversible stabilization. And when you take a look at what that does, it locks down the movement of his head so that his blemishes never move. So now what I was able to do was come in here, and again, using my paint or clone stamp tool, I was able to clone the blemish on his head. But the problem is, of course, is that now his face, if you look at it, it's sort of, and it doesn't look human anymore. So this is where we created a reverse stabilization. Because first we applied a reversible stabilizer. I basically duplicated the same effect with the same tracking points and reapplied it, but this time I'm using reverse. So we're reversing the reversible stabilization. Is this translating? I don't know. Barely makes sense in English, but this is what we end up with. Perfect. Whoa. Yeah. You see that? And again, this is such a common process. This is something that we can use all the time. And literally all we did was use the Warp Stabilizer with default settings on a lockdown shot. So first you apply reversible so that his head movement stays consistent, paint or clone just as you would do in Photoshop, and then reverse the reversible stabilization. This is an amazing effect for post-production and motion graphics work, saving you an enormous amount of time. And you can see that now we have to do a little bit of cropping. Okay, but it saved us so much time that it's really very worth it to do that. Now, just one other quick thing before we move into SpeedGrade and Photoshop. Rufus was talking about upscaling and resampling images, and we have a new resampling algorithm in Photoshop that allows you to rescale things up with very good results. Well, we have a similar technology, again, borrowing technologies from the applications in After Effects as well. So what you can see is that I have some noise. I basically just applied some noise to a solid here, scaled it up to around 5,000%. And previously, if we were to use the previous upscaling method, this was a bilinear scaling method. And bilinear upscaling, while okay, would give you these kinds of, you can see, again, zoomed in very close, you'd get these very sort of sharp, hard artifacts, these sort of twinkly-looking artifacts, which again, if you're scaling 720p to 1080p, it didn't look so good. It looked sharp. It looked over-sharp. It looked just artifacted. That was the bilinear method. Well, in After Effects CC, we now have bicubic upscaling, which delivers much smoother, much more seamless styled results. So just like in Photoshop now, you can do very impressive upscaling without all of the previous linear artifacts that you experienced before. So for anyone who works in VFX and post and does upscaling or HD upresing, the new bicubic upscaling is really incredible. You just have to put it to the test. I've done it myself, upscaling 1080p to 4K, and it's actually usable. It actually looks really good. So when you can, on June 17th, download this, I highly recommend checking that out. Okay, so let's go back to Premiere Pro for 1 second here and talk a little bit about color correction again and using the cloud and collaboration. So this scene that you see here, this was from a film called Waylon's Song. And we have this shot with this woman. And if you take a look at this clip, you can see it's a nice shot, but it has sort of a green hue to it. Now, I wanted to bring this into SpeedGrade to do my color correction, but I'm not a colorist. I enjoy working with color and I enjoy doing color correction, but my color correction, really where I'm most effective is the develop module in Lightroom. I know how to use the develop module very effectively, but color grading, that's a separate art form. I didn't study color theory, Rufus did. So ultimately what I wanted to do was basically give Rufus a still and say, hey, can you just give me a good color correction preset that I can use? Well, yes, he could, but he'd be giving me a still image. What good is that? Well, now we have a shot matching feature in SpeedGrade that will allow your design team, your colorist, your color theory experts to create the look not only for your design and stills elements, but now you can apply those directly in SpeedGrade to color correct your media. So check this out. So what I did was I exported a frame from Premiere Pro to Rufus into my Creative Cloud Files folder, and I shared it with him via the Creative Cloud. And he took that Targa frame and he brought it into Photoshop. Yeah. So then what Rufus did was he created a series of variations for me that I could then basically test, see which I wanted. So here's the original. And then he applied some curves and a photo filter and a color balance and brightness and hue saturation and vibrance. And after all of those changes, that was the one I wanted, that kind of cinematic, very hyper-realistic, teal, orange kind of thing. I really love this look. This looks very now. So what I was able to do from this Photoshop file was save it out as a Targa. When I created my Targa file, I was then able to bring that Targa file into SpeedGrade, which you can see down here. So once again, here is my clip inside of SpeedGrade. Now, SpeedGrade CC, you can see we've done a lot of revamping of the interface here. We've got all new scopes and new ways to monitor your content. So I wanted to basically take this still Targa file that Rufus created and apply that color look to my video. So I can double-click on the still, so you can see a side-by-side comparison here. And now I can choose match look to master playhead, and the color preset is created automatically and mapped to my Photoshop colors. Now, I can't overemphasize how incredible this ability is, because once again, it allows you to have color consistency for everyone involved in your production, and you can have your designer who might be taking stills from your video, right? Remember, today we shoot 1080p, we shoot 2K, 4K. People are pulling stills from these things and using them online, in posters, in movie display cards. One click can now apply the color preset that your designer created and give you incredible color fidelity and color consistency. And then, of course, all of this is still editable. Now, you can't see all the controls down here because I'm in a very small resolution. But you still have the ability to add additional primary, secondary layers, custom look layers, vignettes, tracking, all of those things in SpeedGrade. But very quickly, I was able to apply a Rufus's color look here to my video without even having to think about it, which is really amazing. Okay. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show you in Photoshop with regard to video, and I was talking to a journalist friend a couple of moments ago about this. This is absolutely my most favorite new feature in Photoshop, aside from camera shake reduction, which is amazing. But this is something which I just told you, something that I've been longing for a very long time. I'm a landscape photographer, so when I'm in Lightroom in the Develop module, that's home for me. I know every slider, back to front. I know exactly how to achieve the look I want. Well, now in Photoshop CC, what you can see is that I've turned this video. This is some content that I shot in Africa. Those of you who were here in March may remember some of this content. You can see that I've turned my video into a smart object. And now I can use the Camera Raw filter, which is essentially the equivalent of the Develop module in Lightroom, and apply that to my video. And it's every part of Camera Raw. So not just exposure, contrast, etc. And again, I can come in here and start doing my corrections like this. And again, I want to add a little bit of vibrance to this. Now, any of you who've used Lightroom on video, you know that while it's pretty cool, it's very, very limited. For instance, you can't add sharpening. Well, you can here. So you can perform your sharpening on your video here. You can perform noise reduction. You can perform your vignetting on your video. You have your tone curves. You have your lens corrections, clarity. All of these features are available to you that you have inside of Camera Raw, can now be applied to your video in Photoshop. Now, one of the other new things we've added in Photoshop, fractional playback resolutions. Now, this is not the Mercury playback engine per se, but it does give you better performance when playing back your content. Now, in the case of this, again, this is 1080p. We've got some 32-bit color going on here. This isn't going to play super smooth, but you can see, again, because this is a smart object, remember, I can turn off the color correction, turn it on, and I can perform my color grading here, and then when I'm ready to either further work on this or further edit this in Premiere if I wanted, I could simply export this as something like a DPX sequence, or if I've finished my edit, I could deliver H.264 or QuickTime in a variety of formats and do my export right out of Photoshop. So even if you're not going to be editing in Photoshop, simply to have Camera Raw for your video, that's what it makes me do. That sound every time. Yeah. I have no idea what that was, Rufus. Sometimes I make strange sounds. I work alone a lot, you know. Okay, so where was I? Okay, last thing I'm going to show you here, and this, once again, just speaks to the kinds of innovations that we will be delivering to the Creative Cloud, and the kinds of innovations that set Adobe apart from everyone else. Now, for those of you who've used Adobe Audition before, a very seasoned program, in CS6, we brought back a lot of the features that it was missing from CS 5.5. But in Audition CC, we really wanted to innovate some new ways to create and repair sound. And more importantly, ways to create and repair sound visually using Photoshop tools and techniques. So take a quick listen to this, and I think you'll hear very quickly what's wrong with it.
When I think of a trick, I don't know, when I'm sitting in my house, so I come down here and learn it.
Okay, so this is actually that same scene from this video here.
Sit in my house, so I come down here and learn it.
Okay, that's the audio from that scene right there with Danny Way. And you can hear that there was actually a siren playing in the original clip. Now, this is what we call our spectral frequency display. This is where we're seeing frequency over time. And what you can actually see the pattern, the spectral pattern of the siren. And you can see all of the harmonics, the spectral harmonics of the pattern of the siren. So if I want to remove that, noise reduction really isn't going to do it, because the sound, while it is what we would say cyclical, it has a cycle, a repeating cycle, it's not like removing hum, right? It's not like removing wind noise or fans. It's variable, and there are variables to it. So I needed a new way to do this. Well, now we have something new called the sound remover. So using my Photoshop paintbrush, and remember, of course, for those of you who've never used this before, we have the Photoshop spot healing brush. You think, what does it do on audio? Well, it does the same thing that it does on images. You can paint on the sound to remove, you know, bzz, all of those things with a paintbrush on audio. How are you doing back there? Okay, yeah. All right. So I'm going to take my paintbrush, and I'm going to size this down. Let's go to around 14 pixels. And I'm going to paint over the fundamental frequency. Oh, sorry, pick up my mouse here. And now what I can do in CC is I can hold down my Shift key and I can add additional strokes. So again, the sound removal feature is very good for removing sounds that change over time. Okay, and maybe I'll add one more instance of this here. All right? I'm going to come up to Effects and choose Learn Sound Model. And this is actually going to learn the pattern of the sound that we're trying to remove. So now I'm going to go into what we call our sound remover, and this pulls up a new view in Audition CC, which is called our preview editor, where you can see on top the before and on the bottom the after. And you'll actually see that we have a preset in the sound remover called Remove Siren, okay? Because these kinds of these are very particular kinds of sounds. So, before, all right, and let's just scrub ahead here.
When I think of a trick, I don't know, when I'm sitting in my house, so I come down here and learn it.
Turn it back on, and after. You can still hear the skateboarding, but now,
When I think of a trick, I'm sitting in my house, so I come down here and learn it.
and the siren is gone. Yeah? All right? Now, again, that's obviously, do we all record sounds with sirens in them? Yes, of course we do, every day. No, we don't. That's a joke that didn't translate. Oh. The idea here is that you can use Photoshop tools, you can use visual tools to identify things that change. A good example of this would be if you're trying to remove any kinds of variable background noises or music in a background in a sound file, or a car engine that changes over time, or anything that changes over time. You can paint on it, you can learn the sound model, and you can remove it quite effectively. And you can do it visually. That's the idea, using Photoshop techniques to remove sounds visually. And I believe, Rufus, that's all the time that we have. Yes. So one more thing we wanted to show you now with regard to the Creative Cloud. Many people have asked us and are still not entirely certain sort of how the whole thing works. And internally, they put together this little animation. It's 2 minutes, but I think this really illustrates sort of how the cloud works and how the Creative Cloud can work in your environment, whether you're in a design team or a production team or a web team. So take a quick look at this. Here we go.
Maybe you've heard about Adobe's Creative Cloud, but you're still not completely sure what it is. Simply put, it's a whole new way of working and creating, giving you everything you need to do your best work. When you join Creative Cloud, you get all the same state-of-the-art creative tools you've always used and loved. Tools like Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, Premiere Pro, but they've been completely reinvented to support a more intuitive and connected way of creating. Plus, you have access to brand new tools like Adobe Muse and Edge tools and services for building beautiful modern websites. With one membership, you get every Adobe Creative tool so you can constantly experiment and expand your skills. And the very latest features are always available to you when you're ready to download and install them. Creative Cloud lets you work from anywhere, on any device, wherever you are and with anyone you want. You can sync your files to the cloud to work on them later, access them from another device, or share your files and collaborate with a team. In fact, Creative Cloud was specifically designed to streamline the way creatives work together. You can set up private folders, choose your collaborators, manage versions, and capture all the activity related to your projects, all in one place. And with the integration of Behance, the world's leading creative community, you can showcase your work to millions, get feedback, and get exposure. From right within Photoshop CC, you can post your designs to your Works in Progress portfolio on Behance, and then get instant feedback from your trusted peers. You can also explore and discover the world's best work from leading creatives, peers, and people you know. Behance ProSite is also included with your membership. It's a fully customizable professional online portfolio on your own URL. With ProSite, keeping your portfolio up to date becomes easier than ever. You can also build and publish websites, mobile apps, and iPad applications. It's all included in your membership. Download the creative apps from the cloud to your desktop and use them the same way you always have, whether you're connected to the internet or not. You have a central dashboard to help you keep track of your entire creative universe. Your ideas, files, fonts, colors, settings, and updates and upgrades to your desktop apps, as well as your collaborators and community activity. And you have access to a growing library of tutorials and inspirational content. It's all available in real time wherever you happen to be. Creative Cloud evolves as you evolve and gives you everything you need to keep up, so you can experiment, innovate, and embrace whatever's next. Create now.
All
Okay,
right.
thank you.